fact, yesterday also we had a similar session on innovation, and it was quite a lively session, and we understood the innovation, the challenges involved, and how MSMEs can benefit out of innovation. This session also, we are going to discuss about innovation, and we have with us 6 speakers. One will be my colleague, Mr. C.R. Mitra, is the senior member of the Manufacturing and MSME Committee. And we will have Mr. Swarnava Vandapadhyay, the Director of Bongs Prayukti. We will have Mr. Jayanto Saha, Founder and CEO of Lintas Packaging. Then we'll have Mr. Shubhankar Roy, Founder Director of Trent Corporation. We will have Mr. Robin Roy, Founder and CEO of Susti Now. And with me on my right hand side, there is Mr. Subrata Saha, Director of Saha Steel Private Limited. So over to Mr. C.R. Mitra. He's going to make a brief presentation about this scheme, and then we will go to the panelists and have their views. Mr. C.R. Mitra, please.
Thank you. The topic is Ideate, Innovate, Initiate. And we say the key pillars for achieving self-reliance. Now, why do we talk about these 3 I's as key pillars? When you talk about this Ideate, Innovate and Initiate, you are really talking about design thinking. And why we are talking about design thinking right now? How it is different? Why we are approaching through design thinking? Design thinking is a human-centric approach. Actually, the first step of design thinking is empathize. Means you work with the user, close coordination with the user, and understand and define the problem and solve the problem. How do we do that? First, you understand how the problems are affecting him. And then you define, then you prototype and test it with the end user. So with this close collaboration, design thinking can solve many complex problems. If you see on the screen, you can see that iron triangle, famous iron triangle of project management. That scope, schedule, cost, if any of these 3 constraints are changed, then there will be some impact on either quality, cost, scope or schedule. But in a design thinking, the approach is completely different. I mean, it is a continuous iteration with the end user, and that's why it comes very close to solving the actual problem defined or faced by the user. Many cases, I think, you will also have experience that after the closure of the project is delivered, but you are really not being able to use it. Many times we have also faced. And that is why here I will give you 2 examples. Since we are from the MSME committee, I will take one example for a startup, and the second example is with a small SME. These 2, how they have adopted this design thinking and working with the customer, end user, and made a big solutions, a complex problem they have solved. That the 2 examples I will show. And these 2 examples of startup and SME, we will also see what are the challenges they have faced, what are the advantage on their favor, what are the disadvantage on their favor, on their against. And at the end, we will try to draw conclusion that whether this approach can be followed by other SMEs. Okay, we proceed. Next is, if you see, this is a startup I was talking about. I was surprised to see this startup working in an area, what is called aquaculture. Actually, it's a shrimp farm. And intelligent aquaculture and pond management is a very exciting one, This gentleman was a electronics engineer. He worked with a firm on semiconductor technology for 6 years. Then one day he came to his native and found his uncle is highly depressed and was under tremendous stress because he has lost almost 8 to 9 lakh rupees. He had a shrimp farm and all the shrimp has died. Why? Because he was out of station and somebody did not start the aerator which actually supplies oxygen into the water. Now he was he was wondering, I mean, why this simple problem cannot be solved. Being a technical person, he then went deep into the detail and he found not only this, the dissolved oxygen is the problem, there are many other parameters which have to be controlled simultaneously for pond management. It's quite interesting. They want also need to monitor the pH level. They also need to monitor also the feeding, the timely feeding and switching on generators, and all these individual machines has to be was manually being used. But the most interesting, he has introduced few products. The most interesting product which is so exciting that I wanted to share with you here, because that has given a maximum impact to the user. That is called Shrimp Talk. This Shrimp Talk is a device which monitors the sound of shrimp eating, and actually the sound is like somebody eating kurkure, this kind of sound. And this Shrimp Talk eating, that this sound is fed to a device called Pond Mother. Pond Mother actually distributes the food for the fishes. And what happens with artificial intelligence, they can predict this bunch of shrimp how much they will eat. So they exactly calibrate the feeding to, to the required, up to the required quantity. And this particular thing is like, if you can compare with a drip irrigation, there is no loss of water. So this particular one has solved and given a tremendous benefit. The kind of benefit, I'll just give you one by one. The real-time monitoring of pond for all the parameters on the mobile for the people who are who are concerned. I mean, in the management group, or they are operating the pond. Then they also have reduced the amount of feed by 40 to 50%, and the feed is the chunk of actual cost, is the half of the cost of running a pond. And so this particular user got a huge benefit out of this particular equipment. Now what has happened over the period of time, all these individual equipment what they have installed, they started connecting to each other, they started talking to each other, and they connected through net. And thereby what has happened, he has exported to 10 countries and he controls it from here. So it's a startup working peacefully in an organization, worked out, saw a problem, worked with the customer, empathize. Empathize is the first step of design thinking. Empathize with the customer. What are the problems? Because in a dynamic situation, this problem keeps on changing. And the moment the problem keeps on changing, it is not the intention of the customer to change the scope. But what happens, either for oversight or for the new requirement, you have to change the specification. And in this method of design thinking, you can incorporate that. And that is how this particular gentleman is really moving forward, and in a very prosperous way. So this is one example. Second example is you can see Dr. Ghosh's photograph also at the background. So this particular equipment is known as centrifuge. Many of you probably have seen it. This this is a small SME unit, and what happened, how they got into this design thinking, is a very interesting history. They started as a centrifuge service agent. They started servicing or centrifuge of all the imported centrifuge. In fact, the German centrifuge they used to service, and then gradually extended to others. And from the service, they started repairing parts. Then from repairing parts, they started making spares. From making spares to start developing a product. And this product, why the people will buy it? Why the customer will buy it? So he offered to the customer that I am giving this machine to you, use it for 6 months, don't pay. And after 6 months, if you are satisfied, then only pay me. So with that, he now is not only, doing business here, he is trying to increase his productivity. He is also exporting to the neighboring countries. Now, what problem he has solved or benefit he has generated? If you see, he has actually offered a cheaper product, cheaper solution. When you talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, this is nothing but Atmanirbhar Bharat. Then, in addition, nowadays we don't buy the product, we buy a package. So the service guarantee, because he is a serviceman, so service guarantee is also given. People know him. The customer know him very well. And the customer spend reduced by 25% on imported spares because it's now locally available. So that's the kind of, I would say, the design thinking this gentleman had with his customer, and he completed this particular project. Both are two small companies, and both are having followed this basically ideate, innovate, and initiate. I will come to that. Now, if I see that, now let us compare these two groups. These are both are small, but what are the advantage for the startup, or what are the disadvantage of the startup? And then for SME, we will see the same. So if we see the startup, when they start, the customer and market, they have a freedom to choose. The degree of freedom is very high. So they can choose, they have chosen the shrimp farm. They could have chosen, probably a plastic molder, a plastic molding or industry 4.0. But the disadvantage is that the customer and market is unknown to them. That is their disadvantage. In terms of technology, they have the freedom to choose because all the capabilities may not be available with them, and may not match capability. Many times, you have to procure or buy capabilities, but sometimes it is beyond their means. So that can be a problem. Then resources, since it's a startup, resource requirements are little. It is not a big resource, very small group, but difficult to get support from outside, the financial support and things like that. Okay. Now let us look at SMEs. SME, on the other hand, the customer and market is known. He knows all the customer. But the moment you say that, then you have, on the disadvantage side, you have a limited opportunities. Freedom of going everywhere is restricted. Then in terms of technology, he has to base it on the core competence, because I think if he goes beyond that, then he will not be able to support the market what he is familiar with. But in terms of technology for these SMEs, mostly they use old technologies. That is their disadvantage. In terms of resources are existing. They don't have to procure new things, but they have limited resources. If you ask some group to work on a project, they probably cannot afford more than a person or two. So with these constraints and with this limitation, both could develop solution for the customers, and those solutions are not simple solutions. Those are complex problems and complex solutions, both. Now, let us see what are the challenges they faced. Now, to just look at the understanding the challenge, we see on the x-axis there is a timeline. Timeline moves from left to right, and these activities, the ideate on customer need, because customer is in the focal point of the entire system. Then define the problem and innovate. The next is initiate. What do you initiate? Make a prototype and test. And then after all these, if this is now ready and released, then you start generating revenue. So, but what is the challenge? The challenge is, what about your fund? What about your cash flow? So if you look at this, vertical line, the upper side of the horizontal line is the positive cash flow, and the lower side is the negative cash flow. Now, with all this activity, what happens to the organization, whether it is SME or startup, the cash flow becomes like this. You are in negative cash flow. On the left hand of the vertical line, you have to spend. You are spending money when you ideate. You are spending money when you are innovating, when you are making prototype and test. And after that only you start revenue generation. And that is why there is this particular valley is called VOD, or valley of death. It's a very dangerous one. The valley of death, unless you get out of that, you really cannot go to the next cycle. Now, the interesting point is the ideate, innovate, initiate, these are not a linear process. This is non-linear process. Even after prototype and testing, you may go back and redefine the customer need. That is also possible. And that is why it is called design thinking. It is basically human centric. And that is why the first activity is sympathize with the customer. Then the main issue is innovation is meaningless without monetization. So unless you really can monetize and your innovation, if you don't monetize, then it becomes a hobby and not a business. And you run a risk on the left hand side of the vertical line. Now, what happened with the startup? How did they survive? Actually, what happened with the startup? A large customer, he was also a engineer, going for the fish farming. He actually helped him in making prototypes, giving advances, testing it at his own place, and helping in taking out some part of the valley of death. And for the SME, they were very particular that how much I will spend, how much I can afford, and based on that, they try to, the revenue generation was not coming immediately because they are competing with MNCs. So they had to wait, and they had the initial investment was more than the SME, more than the startup if you compare. So with this, I am trying to conclude that to be successful, an innovation process must deliver three things: the superior solution, lower risk and cost of change. Because if your cost of change is more, that if you look at the pond, all his old system has to be thrown and new system has to be bought, probably there will be a lot of resistance. And still, many small scaler could not afford this IoT based platform. And last but not the least is the employee buy-in. Who are the users, actual users? They must be comfortable. And my point is, the last point what I want to make, if a startup and a very small SME you have seen Anjan, how small he is. If they can do this, then why not other SMEs and startup? So I think Ideate, Innovate, and Initiate is definitely the three main pillar of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Great.
C.R. Mitra. In fact, C.R. Mitra had been in Philips development for 7-8 years. And so he was I would say, the brainchild of innovation. I worked with him. So he has very nicely and in a very short time taken us through the whole journey of these 3 I's. And we have also had the fortune of working together with the MSMEs. And we have seen the type of innovation that they can do. So it has set the total theme of this session. Is Mr. Shwardabo Bandapadhyay connected? Or
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah. Can you,
Shah?
hello, can you hear me?
Blank the screen.
Yeah, Mr. Bandapadhyay is there?
Yeah, I am here.
Yeah, please, you can now put your views and comments about this theme of 3I.
Good evening, everybody. Continuing from where Mr. Mitra left, Mr. Mitra talked about the product innovation mostly, but I am in a
Yes.
service industry. I deal with very soft science and technologies and dealing with lots of real people who are on the ground. So our challenges are very different. And actually, during the last pandemic, we were put in a real difficult situation where we had projects in our hand, and the projects were in the remote part of Meghalaya and Assam, where at that time we couldn't travel, we couldn't do our field service, we couldn't talk to the people, we couldn't do our stakeholder consultations. So we were in a very difficult situation to understand and decide how to go about it. And that, I think, the challenge which led us to this ideate, innovate, and initiate process. So what we did is, instead of sending our people from Calcutta or our other offices to these remote places, we started our networking and identified local resources there, and we put them in the service. But that was a very difficult process, because you were putting an unknown person there whom you have not worked before. So we had to do a lot of due diligence, and resource finding was a challenge. And once we did that, we had to put in a place a real time remote QA/QC process, because if you do the job through them and yet you cannot monetize it, as Mr. Mitra said, then the innovation is of no use. So we had to make sure that the product that we are getting out of them is usable and will bring money to us. So we put in a remote quality control system. We put a lot of different virtual platforms, so that we can check their outputs on a daily basis. We can do a real time corrections of the problems, and that was a very good innovation for us, because it led to a process innovation. So from now, we are not actually sending our people to different places. We are using this model even today. So it has become a new normal for us.
Okay, very nicely put. Mr. Jayanta Shah, are you there? Mr. Jayanta Shah of Lintas?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, please, your comments and views, please, on the subject.
Very good evening, everybody. Actually, I would like to start by thanking BCC and I for giving us the opportunity to share our journey through this pandemic. A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries and other delegators and colleagues. Actually, we started our journey in the year of 1996 with a vision of creating a sense of trust in the metal packaging industry for all the customer in this segment. For all these years, it has been a journey worth living and experiencing across all these years. A lot has changed in the industry, and we are still learning and coping up with the same to the best of our abilities. Running an industry is about facing new challenges every day and overcoming them successfully. The world as it is now, through industrialization and rapid digitalization, has taken a new dimension. However, if thinking that has changed our way of life and industry worldwide completely is the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID was like something which all of us were completely unaware of how to react to the same. In my entire career of so many high and low experiences, did I not face anything of this kind whatsoever. When it first when it first hit, when it is first hit the world and then our country, every one of us were like, what is this? What is this thing? How will it affect our lives? What do we need to prevent of it? So, but so many panic, so many plus minus question, lot of questions, but without an answer. Nobody knows what will be the outcome and answer. Then, when our Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji declared completely lockdown, all of us were like, what to do? What we do? It was almost year ending and people were busy wrapping up their targets for the year to close and finish up their reports to analyze and make the due corrections with discussion for better growth and progress for the next financial year. But suddenly everything came to a complete pause one fine morning. Everything left their job as it is, were waiting to resume soon. But who thought at the beginning that is will be such a prolonged thing? All of us were discussing about what what to do, what we will do, how will things go of this lockdown state for a long time, as it will ultimately hit cash flow, bearing non-productivity. However, we did not need to wait long before. We again resumed our production, though in a very minimized way, from getting a special permission to open up from the Calcutta Municipal Corporation and the local police station. It has been one anxious ride. We came under essential services, essential item to serve the particular client to the industry, to the food crops industry. Likely DIC India Limited is a printing manufacturer and they are our client. So, and ABP Group was the client of DIC India Limited. Rosters were made and alternative-based services were started with two teams of both official and production worker. Before we began our factory on the 8th April 2022, just after 12 or 13 days of the starting of the lockdown, our premises were completely sanitized by the municipal committee and 7 strict COVID rules were laid down. And trainings were given to the production staff by our official as to how they will conduct both inside and outside company premises with strict supervision of the official. On that time, every shot of measure were being taken starting from maintaining social distancing and making isolation ward inside factory premises. So far is possible. Using facial masks and hand sanitizer, regularly temperature check by the temperature meter, digital meter, and different times of the day periodically to ensure maximum safety possible inside company premises. All the team members were provided with masks and hand sanitizer for their personal safety. The factory premises were being sanitized regularly before starting and after the work. No gathering were allowed and lunch time were specified in small group maintaining social distancing, and that is that lunch and everything food was prepared in our premises. All possible and needed special facilities, including regular lunch preparation of all presenting for the particular day and cab services to from the company and to their residents were provided inside the premises. As we were going through completely lockdown, our motto was to stay a tight knit unit and support each other to the fullest in the most difficult times. Other than the health aspect, COVID was adversely affected in the business economy as a whole due to the prolonged shutdown and non-productivity of all industrial and consumer units due to the lockdown. There was huge shortage of cash flow in the market, and capital was getting drained rapidly for every organization, every company faced with a limited inventory. Within days of opening and starting our work, we started facing the issue of stock maintenance. That is the main issue was on that time, the procurement.
Mr. Shaha, one more, sir, 1 more minute.
Mhm. Okay. And the government of India beginning the financial aid scheme for the MSME was like a silver lining for us. The bank was giving us the loan on that time. It's a 20% of the working capital, and we that loan we get in the time, and we do especially thank to show our gratitude to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industries who have been always by our side discussing recovery phenomenon. They have made numerous virtual events on the recovery strategy and funding aids for the entrepreneurs like us to supervise the pandemic and reserve growth and progress continuously. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Shaha. Mr. Shubhamkar Roy, are you connected?
Yeah, yeah, I'm connected. You can.
Please, your
Am I
views on the.
audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay,
Please
great.
continue.
All right. So, a very good afternoon to all eminent speakers and all the participants. Yeah, I know COVID has put us through a lot of stress, and thankful to all these MSMEs who have survived this. So, cash and credit crunch is always being a great issues. I think was even the before the pandemics also our Indian MSMEs and SMEs used to struggle with these issues particularly. It also happened with us even, though we Trend Corporation primarily belongs to the automobile industries, and the effect of demonetization, GSTs has really created a big dip in this particular space. It was a real struggle, and from the struggle, me and my co-founders, with our help of our CAs, we always try to find out like how money can work for us. So and that was a big topic. I don't say it's a one day thing. It was a like daily thing where we have to monitor everything in the cash flows, in the balance sheets, like how the things are working and all these things. So in that thing, so that's how the idea stage came, and company has started called Trend Pay. So the Trend Pay thing is just let me just share you my screen. If So yeah, the credit crunch things and these all things was very much common to us as well. So what we found that in Indians, especially in MSME business and for small companies like us, it's not always the credit crunch is the problem. Though the credit crunch is the problem, this is the last thing of the chain. But it's all starts with a weak financial planning. So in that's what also we also, though we have the team and all these things, but the financial planning was something is very different, and rather than maintaining the accounts. So these two was too different, and which we actually learned when we got into this problem. And so that time, by the time then, thankfully that government was also pushing the digital economy, and the plastics monies was taking the effect into the Indian economical systems. So this is how the trend pay basically works. Here, what we saw that we had collaborated with banks and the other card companies, and like we said, like why can't we use our this corporate cards to pay the conventional payments like the salary for our company, for the government taxes, for office rents, EMIs, and all. And that's how this idea came up of the trend pay. And this is really is working. And so what with help of this we have found a gateway. It is a B2B gateway where like using this gateways, the companies can make the payments of these conventional payments like the salaries, tax, and all these things, which was not possible earlier through the plastic money. But now, yes, via your credit cards, you can pay for this also, and you can save a substantial amount of cost of funds. There was most of the card companies in today's world is giving almost 45 to 60 days a credit limit, and if we can manage our finances in and around that thing, so I think a 60 days credit was, it has really worked for us, and we have saved a lot of money, and it has really add up in our cash flows. So that was a process, was very simple. It was just paying through the machines that we have seen. And this is how the ideation has came, as is, the need is the basic of of all invention. So that's how we also stuck with the problem, and then started hunting the what could be done to do work on these things. So just to add with, this system is very much popular in the Western countries as well, and especially the companies like Visa, Mastercard, who are aligned with the card manufacturers companies. They are also taking interest into getting into the mainstream financial system of India. So like so the if you see the in today's world is only 3 to 4% amount of transactions happens with plastic money for so it's like only the merchandise purchases or the travel payments, that's it. But the mainstream payments like the salaries, EMIs, and whatever for the businesses spends at the end of the day, so that is has to be done from their own cost of funds. So that's something I say. So I would lastly I'll say it's not that there are problems, and problems will be always there. That's the other side of the coin, but that should not affect your goals. Don't adjust the goals, just adjust the action steps what need to be done. One door closed means there will be another doors will be open. Thank you.
Mr. Roy. Very nice to know that you could circumvent the problem with innovative solution. And your last words are very, very nice. That don't adjust your goals. Very good. Thank you so much. Mr. Robin Roy of Sustina, are you connected?
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening to everybody. Okay, like every day now, I'm still on the field, and hope you are able to see me.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay. And can you, I'm audible to you, right?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Uh, Thank you, the organizer. And I think I would talk about sustainable a little bit, and then I talk about my other endeavor on the innovation and what do we understand, what do I understand by innovations. Okay. Sustainable Advisory Private Limited. Sustainable Advisory Private Limited is working on the domain of sustainability, and almost 3 years back, uh, couple of I come from IIT background, so a couple of IITians we started thinking that we talk about sustainability and all those things, but how do you measure it? So because unless and until we measure it, it's very difficult to come up with a model and the financial valuations or valuation based on the sustainable values. And then we went through a lot of literature surveys and other things, and then we accepted that the same Bellevue principle, which is people, planet, and the profit, we called it prosperity. Okay, so that from that background we came up with this measurement of sustainability, and Sustino is trying to measure this sustainability. Am I audible to you? Hello.
Right, carry on.
Yeah. So currently we are working on 3 areas, though we have 11 chapters, but it's very difficult to start 11 chapters simultaneously. So we are working on 3 chapters, which is one is there's sustainable farming, and which is 2.5 years back we presume that this kind of the bill which we are now seeing probably is not been accepted yet, but we saw that there is a lot of potential in farming sectors. And farming sector requires a valuation based on the sustainable model. So we came up with that thing that say suppose a contract farming will be a person wants to have have an investment in farming, and the farmer wants to have an access to fund. But how do we match them? What is the rating? How a person would know that this is the kind of farming land one would expect for the farming? So we are giving a solution on this, starting from digital mapping of the land, and then rating, and then what kind of crops are coming in the field, and what is the yield, what is the valuation, all those things in coming into sustainable farming. And second thing, we are working on the sustainable living. That includes we are trying to embed the life of different persons and trying to see that whether we can create, it's an open online platform, and whatever the values they can generate, whether this is sellable or not. Okay, it includes the very very marginalized person, and we are trying to see that what kind of value he can offer. Okay, and so we are bringing to the platform, and whatever value he is offering, we are trying to see that trying to understand the peace index between countries. That's a very niche area, because we feel that the defense budget of any country should be measured and based on some analytical model. So there is a lot of data analytics goes into that, and working on the ADB and United Nations, because we have been working with UNDP. So this is a completely a niche area, trying to understand that what is the peace index between two countries, so that the defense budget can be one of the measurement or one of the basis for defense budget based on the peace index. So this is all about Sustino, is trying to understand that whether there is a business model in the sustainable area. And coming to my other endeavor in innovations, I think the first speaker, Dr. I forgot the name, when he talked about the designing of the solutions, we saw that in Indian ecosystem, people understand a lot of technologies, and they understand the problem solving aspects also. But most of when I talked about a lot of innovators and lot of entrepreneurs even, we saw that there is a gap in understanding the product, and product is the ultimate which is sold in the market. The concept of product and has to be built in through the institutionalized approach. So what does it mean? It means that the curriculum will be needs to be set based on development of a product rather than of development of an engineering course or development of an entrepreneurial course. Because entrepreneurs is the last stage. A person who has the solution, they must come to business and roll the things. So we are going little at the primary stage that how to develop a product. So that's an institutional, trying to bring it to the institutional approach. An institutional approach means that there will be course curriculum. IIT Jodhpur has joined with us, and we signed an MOU also, and trying to working on that how do we roll up a model on product development. So that's how, and I have solar energy companies. These are very, I would say that solar energy and other things, these are completely marketized things. So I have now given it to almost all the things to professionals because my interest lies on the initial stage development, and when the business grows to 10 to 11 CR, then I would like to give it to the professional because I'm not good in running a business. I think my endeavor lies into developing a business. Thank you very much. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Mr. Robin Roy. Very nice insight you have given. Now we have Mr. Subrata Saha, the director of Saha Steel Private Limited. Your views.
Yeah, I was hearing, and really, it's indeed very exciting session, and particularly these three I. In terms of I, it is an alphabet I, but finally it is the Tritiya Nayan, third I. So these, if we actually say that the third eye, until or unless we open our third eye, we don't see the reality inside. Without innovation, we cannot live. Yesterday also there was a fantastic session on innovation, and continuous innovation is the thing that it is really required currently. At every step, I think innovation is required, and every step innovations are done. Particularly in the MSME, intrinsically they are innovative. I mean, they have to innovate because as we know that we are asked to be Atmanirbhar, we are always Atmanirbhar. MSME segment is always Atmanirbhar because no one is there to take care of them. If they face any problem, when people block their roads of their vehicles, no one is there to rescue them. If they go to the police station, no one is going to help them. If they go to court, no court helps them. So we know that we are already Atmanirbhar. And with this, we have to innovate our business processes, we have to innovate our services, and continuously. Now, at the back end, the main thing has started that we see is that, whatever we offer to consumer community or to any industry, at every point in time, what we found that we need to work a lot about, of course, the application of design thinking and IoT. Continuous consumer research, continuously watching the consumer trend and accordingly designing our thinking process and accordingly redesigning our offers, both in terms of service and in terms of our products. That is need of the hour.